With 4 shots from what was supposed to be a ceremonial pistol, Dulinor changed the course of Imperial history forever. Today we're going to take a look at Dulinor's faction out of the Rebellion sourcebook. We're going to take a look at who supported Dulinor and why he thought he could assassinate Emperor Strephon and claim the throne as his own. We're going to take a look at a little bit of the historical precedent that was set for him to do that and what his actions led to, and a little bit more about Dulinor the man. So today on page 121 from the Rebellion sourcebook, Dulinor's faction. Dulinor's faction. This is pretty interesting. Dulinor, of course, is the Emperor's assassin. He killed Emperor Strephon on day 132 of 1116 of the Imperial calendar. Dulinor, the Emperor's assassin, has retreated to Eilish to rally forces for his own drive for the throne. So what do we know about Dulinor? What the heck is this guy? The assassin Dulinor began the rebellion with his actions at the palace on day 132 of 1116. The faction name is Dulinor, by announcement in 1116, stated that he was the emperor and titular head of the Third Imperium. Between 1116 and 1118, he referred to his empire as the Third Imperium or simply the Imperium. In early 1119, he formally named his government and the Federation of Eilish. Opposing factions generally call the faction Dulinor's Imperium or simply refer to Dulinor. The leader is Archduke Dulinor Astron Eilithian. He rose to the highest levels of the nobility in the domain of Eilish with the approval and support of Emperor Strephon. As Archduke, he built for himself a strong following in the sectors of Eilish and Zaru-Shigar, and was readily accepted as the leader of the region when he assassinated Strephon and seized the throne for himself. Dulinor's territory encompasses 36 subsectors, centered roughly on Delan, Dulinor's capital in the domain of Eilish. The territory includes nearly all of Eilish sector and portions of Gushamig, Verge, and Sharu-Shigar sectors. Constituents are, in addition to solid support from the territory of Dulinor's Imperium, Dulinor claims as his constituents a broad spectrum of imperial citizens who want a deeper involvement in the Imperium in the affairs of its component worlds. Dulinor's ideology was that the Imperium must extend its benefits to its world, not merely the space between the worlds. He wanted more involvement in the actual governing of each and every one of the imperial worlds. Unlike many nobles in the Imperium, Dulinor had a deep-seated feeling of responsibility for the masses of the empire. As he rose in rank, he developed a strong sense of purpose to provide the greatest possible benefit for the greatest number of imperial citizens. Although the Imperium includes over 8,000 worlds, each has its own government. The Imperium rules the space between the stars. Its effects are felt on all worlds only through the channels of the independent governments of those worlds. Dulinor wants to exert more influence on those worlds, charging them to be more democratic, with more democratic, responsive policies. So he's really seeing himself as a champion of the everyman, the every sophont, on all these different planets. He wants a uniform government no matter what. 8,000 worlds have 8,000 different sets of problems. I think it'd be really, really difficult to take one cookie cutter approach to ruling each and every world the exact same way, a garden world as opposed to a world that can be, incredibly difficult to live on, or perhaps you're just an asteroid colony, and that's the, quote, main world of the region. How the heck do you apply the same governance and rules to both those entities? Dulinor thought it was possible. For a time, he felt that Strephon was with him, and he felt that way as well. And for a while, it looked like Strephon was. But in the last few years of Strephon's reign, Dulinor felt that Strephon was pulling away from the policies he and Strephon had discussed. So Dulinor took action to force the situation by assassinating Strephon and trying to claim the throne by right of assassination. Dulinor's symbol, the imperial symbol, shows a single star, yet the Imperium is a unity of many stars. Dulinor selected as the symbol for his advanced form of the Imperium the galaxy itself, representing millions of stars considered together as a single unit. So there you have Dulinor's symbol. Dulinor's strengths and weaknesses. His plan assumed that he would take over the Imperium intact. When part of the plan was frustrated, the survival of his Imperium hinged on the strength and weaknesses of his faction. Dulinor's strengths. He claims three basic strengths for his empire: the element of surprise, a moral appeal to individuals who want more involvement of worlds in the empire, and an easily defensible territorial position. Dulinor's first advantage is the benefit of surprise. He is able to act and then broadcast the first news of his actions before objective accounts could be disseminated. His own accounts, slanted to his best advantage, ensured that citizens of the domain of Eilish knew and sympathized with Dulinor's principles. At the same time, Dulinor's principles themselves had a broad appeal. The tradition that the Imperium left world surface affairs to the component world governments meant that there was a broad disparity of citizens' rights and privileges. The appeal of consistent and liberalized treatment of citizens within the Imperium was obvious to most and gained an immediate acceptance. Dulinor's campaign proposed to be a gradual transformation of the worlds of the Imperium into liberal democracies. Dulinor also enjoyed a territory that was easily defensible. Backed up against the vast voids of the Great Rift, the rift effectively shields his territory on two sides, reducing the frontage that must be defended against retaliatory attacks. That explains how Dulinor was able to hold out even for a little while, let alone for years, against the force of the Imperial Navy. He had, of course, Imperial Navy vessels himself. He also had the advantage of pre-planning, so he had already had those vessels strategically placed. And then, of course, he was protected by the Great Rift behind him. I realize space is three-dimensional, but the rift itself is three-dimensional, and Dulinor enjoys a great deal of protection from the rift. So you can only approach him from the quote front unquote. Dulinor's weaknesses. Dulinor crippled the appeal of his faction with his murder of Strephon. Although there were well-documented precedents for his actions, and the dramatic changes he planned for the Imperium required that there be extensive shifts in the Imperium, a broad public reaction against the murder worked against the acceptance of Dulinor as a leader. And I think that's valid. Here you see this guy who's using any means to justify the end. How's he better than anybody else? Even as Lucan goes madder and madder, Dulinor still doesn't appear to be a great choice. Dulinor's homeworld of the land Eilish is a religious dictatorship, which I think also probably played not well with the rest of the world, or rest of the Imperium. Its society is shaped in great measure by the beliefs of its population. Virasa, the primary religion of the land, believes that to acknowledge God is impossible during one's life, that discussion of the existence of God or his attributes is fruitless. Nevertheless, Virasans have extensive beliefs in the afterlife and its nature, and they are taught that the paradise of the afterlife, all knowledge will be theirs. By logical extension, great knowledge is equated with paradise. Virasans believe only they will reach paradise, and anybody who doesn't believe won't. So it's a very narrow view, and I think a lot of the problem with Dulinor also was the fact that even though he wasn't a Virasan follower, the fact that he grew up on this planet made everybody nervous that this might become some kind of state religion, and I think that kept a lot of people nervous about him. Local custom dictates that non-believers on the land wear black in recognition of their non-believing status. Believers and non-believers are governed by different laws, but the distinctions apply primarily to allowed occupations to taxation. Violent death is repugnant to Virasans, so military occupations are restricted to non-believers. Lower taxes for non-believers make up for the restricted occupations of the military and police. By extension, the land military and police forces wear striking black colors. Dulinor, born on the land and holder of the hereditary fief as a noble, is not a Virasan. Because of his background and his participation in Delaney society, he easily and naturally follows its clothing customs and typically wears black. That would make a lot of folks nervous. Even if he's not a follower, a professed follower, he was raised in this culture, and this culture is a religious dictatorship that has two separate castes. And here is the man who has murdered to try to gain the throne and saying, under me, everyone will be equal. And everybody's got to kind of look at this and say, well, how true is that? What's your real motive? And Eilish had revolted once before in the year 418. It got pounded for its troubles. And by 420, the revolution had spread to 6 subsectors. But in 420, Martin III acted to impose blockade around all the insurgent territory. They were mobilized throughout the Imperium in order to fill out the siege lines. As the noose drew tighter, the density of ships in the lines increased. As each world fell to the siege, the inevitability of imperial victory became stronger. The Imperium was patient in its campaign, minimized its own losses by avoiding confrontations. At the same time, its own overwhelming fleet force made confrontations rare. Instead, the Vault was slowly and carefully ground down. The last world to fall was Eilish itself. When it did, in response to a demand for unconditional surrender in 435, the Imperium mandated the evacuation of all population in the lush equatorial zones, and then scrubbed the zones of their flora and fauna. 700 years later, the equatorial zone of Eilish remains a sterile desert. The capital of the Eilish sector was shifted to Delan, a high population world which remained loyal to the Imperium. The Eilish revolt challenged the central authority of the Imperium. In the face of overwhelming assets of the Imperium, no part of the Empire has any hope of succeeding. But the revolt also showed the Imperium could flex its muscles. So basically what happened is, by crushing this revolt several hundred years ago, Martin III also made a long-term hotbed of discontent. They went to Eilish, the capital of the insurrection, and sterilized the equatorial zone and left it, and then moved the capital to a different land. So this is an area that, at least by tradition, has had unhappiness with the Imperium as a whole, and I felt that that was a good part of why Dulinor felt that the right of assassination was the way to go to quickly get his policies on the throne and get things changing in the Imperium. As I said, I always wondered if Dulinor was actually playing a quiet game where he was going to set up the Imperium to become some kind of religious dictatorship, but we'll never know. Interestingly, too, in this photo, or this sketch of Dulinor with his symbol behind him, I always thought he looked like a young Tom Jones in that particular sketch. So that's all I've got to say about Dulinor's faction. He has many fleets to draw on that are in his as the Sector Duke. He has several fleets to draw on and have declared loyalty for him. So they are in revolt against the Imperium. They have gone against the Imperial fleet. And we'll see that many of the fleets chose to do that. Dulinor has a pretty easily redoubt to defend against the Imperium, and Lucan, in trying to be strong in all directions at once, is making himself weak in all directions at once, and is really unable to just bring enough force to bear at one point and crush Dulinor as he should. So that's all I've got to say today on page 121. I hope you're enjoying this series. If you are, please give me some comments and let me know. I only know how these series are received by people telling me how they are and by view counts. I'm enjoying doing this series, and I'm willing to keep going for quite some time, but I need to know that this is something that folks want to see. That's all I've got for today on page 121. I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.